Hello, and welcome to another episode of In Bed with Books. I'm your host, Melissa, and today we are joined by author Eloisa James, author of The Last Lady Bee, which should be out now. Eloisa, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Eloisa, and I'm a Shakespeare professor and a romance writer. I've been doing both of them for over 20 years. And yeah, this is my new book. See, I can wave it too.
And
We're
yours
both
doesn't have
waving it.
the ARC stickers on there, so you're good.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm really happy with this new book. It's a different direction for me. And so it's a lot of fun to talk to you about it.
Awesome, awesome. Let's dive into that a little bit. How is this one different than some of the previous books you've written?
Well, I've written historical romance mostly, right? And I wrote a contemporary, a tearjerker called uh, now I can't remember my own name, Lizzie and Dante, right, which was published under Mary Bly, which is my name as a scholar. And then I've written a memoir about living in Paris, but I've never written a Gothic. So this is my first Gothic. And
Nice.
the way I'm explaining it is kind of Gothic adjacent because a proper Gothic has, maybe a vengeful ghost and some seriously grotesque details. I mean, the most famous Gothic, people get mashed and mangled, and then the scary ones like Rebecca, that, you're terrified. My book is not like that, but it's Gothic adjacent. There is a ghost, not that she says much or anything, but she's there.
Well, I like that even from the beginning, Genevieve Evie seems very conscious of the fact that she's not that she's in a book, but that she's like stumbled into this kind of gothic story and she's like almost romanticizing being isolated in the Scottish mountains and everything. No, I love that, especially because it kind of brings a levity to some of the more sordid details of
Yeah.
the story that she stumbled into.
Yeah, well, I mean, I try to be a funny writer, so that means that a real gothic or, just kind of a super dark one's never going to work for me.
Mm.
But I would say that my goal here was to be like Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, which is different than any of her other books because her the heroine of Northanger Abbey has read too many Gothics, which we know, by the way, that Jane Austen was reading those Gothics, because we know her name was on the subscription list for them, which I find fascinating. So she's gobbling up all these Gothics herself, and then she creates a heroine who's read too many of them and thinks she sees ghosts everywhere and secret wills and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I wanted to do, is kind of make fun of the genre at the same time you're writing it, so that the reader gets the pleasure of reading a Gothic and making fun of a Gothic. And the way to do that was to have my heroine also be as addicted to novels as
Yeah.
Jane Austen's is. So yeah, when the way we all do, right? I think we all tend to narrativize our lives some based on our reading or watching practices.
Absolutely. And I loved that Genevieve and Colette both and I think even Ophelia at one point they're like, "But I've read all the books."
Yeah.
Like their instruction manuals for living in the Scottish mountains. And it's yeah, we all I very easy to fall into or to subject yourself to almost.
Yeah, just to give readers a bit of a background, because this book is just out. Um, my heroine, Genevieve, Evie, marries a man in order to get her little sister, a dowry. He's had three dead wives. He's, very elderly. And they're headed up to this haunted abbey in Scotland that's his, where all three wives died, the previous ones. And there's three battlements, and supposedly all three wives are on the battlements. Each would get their own battlement, you know, and she gets up there and there's just one surprise after another after another. So it's like, I had a lot of fun reading it. I would say if I based it in a sense I learned from Jane Austen, is more like a Dickens novel because there's so much plot. The plot just comes and comes. And then, of
Yeah.
course, there's, I think, a great love story too.
Oh,
Love
there
story.
is. There absolutely is. Even at the beginning when I guess well, I mean you mentioned it, so I'll dig into it a little bit. So when she meets Godric and she's
Yeah.
like, well, he's so tall and dark and broody and obviously no woman could love him. I'm like, girl, you're falling in love with him right now. I'm falling in love with him right now.
Well, she did. She's waiting to meet the people in a Gothic novel, right? So obviously he's the villain. No
Yeah.
question, he's the villain. He's so sardonic and dark and da da da. So she's like, click, check. got him,
Hmm.
check. So yeah, there's the housekeeper, check. You know,
The what does she say? The evil butler.
evil butler, check.
Yep.
That was fun. That was really fun. It was just a, I think it comes through. It was just so much fun to write this book.
It
It's
it reads like that. It's so messy in like the
mm.
best way. I was just the the big reveal early on, which I will slightly mention, we don't need to get into too much, is that as much as her very proper, very old husband talks about the way that ladies are supposed to be and the way that wives are supposed to be, he conveniently has a mistress and has through now three wives. I think at first it seems like she might have been there for 30 years, but there's some, some gossip that she's been there actually for 40 years. And I was livid when I read that. I thought he ran off because he was like, an old man and he needed to get inside and he was cold or had to use the restroom or any number of things that happen after you've been traveling for a long time.
Right.
The reveal that there's just been this mistress the entire time, women put up with so
Yeah.
much.
Well, so to set the stage, Evie arrives in the courtyard of the haunted abbey and she meets the villain, i.e. Godric, who it's clear to everyone she's going to fall in love with. And her husband rushes off into the abbey. Well, he's rushing off to go greet his long-term mistress, whom he hasn't mentioned, and who's going to be sort of living next door. So I thought it was really fascinating. Obviously this was written a year ago, but I was watching Bridgerton season 4, and it was very useful for me because I do feel like people who watch that are going to have a more acute sense of just how impossible it is for a proper young woman, married woman of the aristocracy to be living under the same roof with the mistress. Remember how like if you watch Bridgerton, the mother, what's her name, Violet? Violet's like, we won't be able to visit you very much, and that's if they were married.
Yeah,
This is like, oh, different.
very
So,
different. And I think there's it's very starkly like touched on in the book, but there's so many hoops that he must be jumping through mentally to make this make sense.
yeah.
And there's points where I like can't wrap my mind around the way that he's justifying it as if he wasn't an adult still when he met her, because we find out that he did at one point want to marry her. And his father, he talks about his father like, stopping him and putting sense into him and everything. And he can't even be bothered to like find her a spot in London, which we learn, of course, is typical of mistresses, is that they'll get a house in Covent Gardens. And the the appalling levels of sexism going on for him to one, make it make sense, two, still denigrate her and his like secret daughter and his like now daughter-in-law. I It's
You
just
were
so much.
livid. Yeah. Well, think
uh
about it. I mean, think about how often this is happening. I'll just say on the day that we're taping this, there's some very unfortunate newscast about a reprehensible senator who, had had some terrible affair with someone, and now it's come out he had another one, and he has six
mhm.
children. Things like that. These men are obviously doing mental gymnastics in order to tell themselves it's fine,
Yeah.
right? It's fine because it's me. And he's doing that. I think one of the interesting thing is when she arrives in the courtyard, she's like, oh, you know, there's Godric, there's the villain. But in fact, the villain has just walked past Godric
Hmm.
into the house. And so, in case anyone's wondering, he doesn't come to a good end. It was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
No violence in my book. He dies in his sleep, but out he goes.
But he gets the end he deserves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. And romance, in a big way, is about comeuppance, right? It's about women, mostly women reading it who are like, this is not fair. And everyone deserves to have someone who loves them. That's comeuppance. Comeuppance is the bad get theirs, the good gets theirs, the good girls get a fabulous guy who may look like a villain, but he's actually a warrior in disguise, which is
Mm.
Godric. One of my
Yes.
favorite heroes, I think, actually. He's great.
I would have to agree. And it's, I think some of it's the dichotomy of like Burnsby, the husband, actually being one of the worst people, like in a good way,
Yeah.
testament to you, one of the worst people I've ever read in a romance. But I like that this does lean, like, yeah, it's Gothic, it has the Gothic elements. Godric is almost a Byronic hero. Like, he doesn't quite have some of the, like, he's not really an outcast, even though he has some of the symbols of it or some of the visuals of it. But then up against Burnsby, it's like, oh, this guy's an angel sent from heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I had, because it's very unusual to start a historical romance with the heroine married,
Hmm.
right? My editor was very kind of worried about it, but I think that right now we're really into big emotion, right?
Hmm.
We don't want these little narrow things, little narrow books. We're all being buffeted by a lot of emotion all the time. And I think it's great to escape into a book and know if things are going to work out. So, because that was the case, I did give him more sort of signs of he's a better guy than a lot of my heroes. A lot of my heroes are really good guys. They all are. I mean, I don't have any bad people, but he's like fighting the good fight, like day in, day out.
Yeah.
And you know, and it wrenches him to the core when he realizes just who Evie is, who's married to this man. I don't want to tell anymore because there's so many little things. I switched it, I made it so you have like reveal, reveal, reveal,
Yeah.
reveal, reveal, just to keep it fun.
Well, I like that in like Evie and Godric's exchanges, you see all of that emotion unravel. But going back to, you don't normally start historical romances with them married. And it was very sudden. It's like the prologue. She's telling
Mhm.
her dad, by the way, I'm getting married today, and this is for Rosie because we need to get her a dowry because she deserves the romance that I didn't get. Great, like, great place to start. We jump 7 months ahead. She learns how much of this has been lies,
Mhm.
but having them married or having her married and like unable to get Godric, because there of course was the part of me that like when we find out about the mistress, um, it's like, yeah, okay, so now we're gonna have sex with Godric, right? That's what's gonna happen. But
No,
no, the tension, the
I
tension
know.
that this built up. There's parts where like in the margins I've written, I'm gonna go feral if they don't like do something
That's
now.
great. Because what it did for me was I was like, okay, there's a lot of books with a lot of sex. And actually, I think the sex is really great in this book, but a lot of it is just about desire.
Yeah.
It's about wanting what you cannot have. Because for a lady at this period, or for Godric, you cannot have each other. And yet you can have this just waves of desire and erotic desire. And because, Burnsby's such a horrible guy, they're in a way feel free to feel that, not to act on it, not to talk about it, nothing, but it makes it very vivid. And I will say that because the book is in first person, which is, relatively new for me, all I've written is a short story, that also ramped up the desire a lot. It allows, I think, the reader or to actually feel what the heroine's feeling instead of
Mhm.
having it described for you, which was an interesting difference for me.
Well, I think the isolation also kind of helps with this
Mm.
because in the same respect that it's adding this suspense and this, they're a little too cooped up. There's a little bit of cabin fever implied here, and they're stepping out of the bounds of like what's normal beyond the mistress, but just kind of with the habits of the house. Like suddenly they're eating all of their meals in the library because
Yeah.
it's helping with house or abbey
Mm.
relations. Um, and you can see that in her and Godric navigating these feelings as they kind of reveal a little bit more, but then have to pull back even as they're revealing that because they're like, at some point we're leaving this abbey and that can't actually happen.
Yeah, yeah, you're a great reader. I love this.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like I wrote for you. It's wonderful. Because,
Uh,
when you're writing, you're hoping that people will enjoy just that, right? Because it's not historic. It is. And so a Gothic is always, a young woman who's isolated, which makes Gothics extremely difficult now because we're never Goths, cell
Yeah.
phones everywhere, right? Look at Twilight. Like there has to be a town where cell phones don't work.
Yeah.
But you're isolated, you're in danger, you are often, there's a love interest, all these things are happening, right? But at the same time, the core backbone of it for me had to be historical romance, had to be romance, which meant that all the proprietary, sort of what it is to be proper and what it is to be a member of your class had to be a huge structural part of the Gothic, which it might not otherwise be. Another Gothic would spend a lot more time thinking about danger. I'm not interested in danger, but
Hmm.
I am interested in I can't do that because I'm a lady.
Yeah.
I
And
can't, I can't do what I wish I could do.
that's like the pressure of
Yeah.
the narrative here. And I really like at the beginning of each chapter because it's first person, but I almost feel like the intended audience is Rosie, her younger sister, because
Yeah.
each chapter starts with like um a little rule for Rosie to
Yeah.
like figure out navigating the marriage market and everything. Um but how
And
much that's
life.
shifting.
Here,
Yeah,
why don't I
and
give you
life.
one? Like, here's the beginning of chapter 2. If you ever find yourself in a melodrama involving ghosts and villains, try to enjoy yourself. Compared to fiction, ordinary life is so boring. She's,
Yes.
little bits of advice for her little sister.
Yeah, and I like the way that like that balances out some of the heavier, even if it doesn't get that heavy, but the like touching on heavier gothic elements of
Yeah.
this because it really, there's the scene when we meet or not meet, but when we first think we see a ghost
Hmm.
and we find out that actually it's most likely been Ophelia the whole time because she's been cooped up. And who wouldn't start to pretend to be a ghost when you're, almost of marriage market age and you haven't been allowed to leave the nursery?
Teenage girl.
Yes.
Yeah, teenage girl stuck in the abbey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
You
course you'd
would be
start pretending
trouble.
to be a
You would create
ghost.
trouble.
Yeah. But even when that's revealed, it's or like when we first see the ghost, it's pretty quickly revealed that it is Ophelia. And I like that because it's like all of the dangers that she thought that she was kind of excited to like bring some kind of pep into her step are nothing compared to the actual drama that is this house.
Yeah. Yeah, the drama, I mean, in the end, fiction is so interesting, but I think the reason why I started chapter 2 with that is that fiction is so much more interesting, but once she falls in love and once everything is happening around her and once Ophelia becomes essentially her daughter, life is so much more interesting than fiction.
Mhm.
And that's, I think we all find that at some point, especially when you fall in love. So that was the flip, right? The flip
Yeah.
is I'm all about fiction. I'm all about fiction. I'm married to an old guy, I'm not never going to have kids. My life is this. Oh no, wait a second. Life has just gone into color. So,
There's this like she kind of steps out of her own life, if that makes sense. Or when we first meet her, she's already at that space. And
yeah.
so it is so exciting to watch her open up because, yeah, because she meets these people who there's one point when I think they were playing cards and she's just like, for the first time in my life, I felt like I could just be myself. I didn't feel like I needed to lie. That's one of the things that I really enjoy her recurring
Yeah,
thing where she's like, yeah, ladies have to lie. It's
right.
just like a fact. If we want to be proper, we're supposed to lie. And
Yeah,
it's
they
funny how
do.
things don't really change.
Yeah, it's a found family story for sure.
Hmm.
Um, she makes a best friend there. That was a lot of fun to write. It was the woman who becomes her best friend is Black, and there were lots of freed, extremely rich Black people in Paris at this time. So she's French, she's incredibly fashionable, and she's incredibly funny. And when you're a writer, you make the friends you wish you had, or to some extent, friends you do have. So I wanted her to find a family that was everything that would make up for what she hadn't had,
Hmm.
including the piglet, I have to say.
Yeah.
Don't save the piglet. Peony. Peony,
Uh,
I think is going to be a reader favorite.
yes. yes. Oh my gosh, when they described the tram to push her around because she was getting a little too fat from all of the treats that the household was feeding her. I was like, that's yep.
Yeah,
Um,
she had to go in the pram, but they all loved her. So, uh,
yeah, which I was curious about when you first introduced Peony as like, because of course they're going to the butchers. This is not a time when pigs would really be that fashionable of a pet, but it
no.
was still, oh, the way she just like everyone loves her, even Colette the Parisian.
Yeah, no, pigs are, I grew up on a farm, right? My dad was a poet, but his dad was a farmer. So we grew up on a farm. And there were, we didn't raise animals, but there were pigs around. Pigs are incredibly smart. One of
Hmm.
my cousins was raising them, and he was raising them as farm animals. But inevitably, I remember my cousins complaining because some pig would show so much personality that they would become a friend, right? They would become a pet, and then they would be begging their dad, da 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 da, and then the pig would end up having to go off to live somewhere else and not be turned into bacon, essentially because he showed so much personality. So I do have that in my background. I know that there are pigs. Like when my heroine is in the street, a little tiny Scottish street, right? And a stream of piglets comes by that's going to market and they all stop and take a nap. Pigs do that. They just fall over and take a nap when they're very tiny. And Peony leans up against her leg for a nap. And
Ugh,
that's the moment at which she begins to step out of being a lady. Because as she says, like a lady can barely have a cat, can barely have a dog, would never have a pig. But she has a pig. And and that's the moment when she starts putting her foot down and becoming herself, right? She's like, this is my pig. And her husband's like, that's improper. That's okay. And she's like, this is my pig. And that's the first time she's drawn a line in the sand with him. And it's, it's a metaphor, huge metaphor as well.
and I love that that happens before she meets the mistress.
Yeah.
Um, because like of course once she meets Sophonisba,
Sophonisba, yeah.
once she meets Sophonisba, I mean, gloves are off. She's pulling punches left and right, and I love that for her. But I love that it starts before it being a response to that,
Hmm.
and just comes
Yeah.
from herself, comes from that little moment of like an animal seeking refuge with her.
Yeah, it's about love. The whole book is kind of about love. Who do we love?
Mhm.
Who do we protect? Right? She's going to protect Phoebe, but she's going to protect Ophelia too. Ophelia will become her daughter. And so that was a lot of fun to read. There are books that you're just sorry to see them go.
Yeah,
You're sorry to finish them, but happy to bring it out. I mean, I'm happy that people are going to be reading it. That's exciting. So that's
yeah,
great.
I love this.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned your father, Robert Bly.
Mhm.
How much of an influence was he on your career and I guess both careers as an academic and then as a writer?
Yeah. I mean, much so more so on me as a writer, to be honest. So my dad, Robert Bly, won the American Book Award for poetry. I mean, he was a great poet. He's passed away now, but um, he always, romance doesn't have a good reputation, right? My mother called it that sex stuff. She too was a literary person, but she just could not get over the fact that I was writing in a genre that she considered disreputable, and uh, she her ideas, and she loved me very much, but her ideas show up in a lot. She was raised with maids, and that sex stuff was over there somewhere. But from my dad, a book was a book. You're writing. Everyone should be writing was his view. And I'm just going to show you this. I've never showed anyone this, but I found it the other day. Look at this. Love letter from my dad to my mom. Back when my mom was at Wellesley and he was at Harvard.
Oh,
And she was not answering his letters. That's
oh,
typical of my mother. So he sent her a poem, you know, and it's a little poem, and then it just says for Robert and for Caroline at the top. I am sorry I cannot fill my hands with moonlight and give it to you. I go back to bed and dream of meeting you again. It's lovely. It's really lovely. Um, but
If
you know
any
that,
men happen to be listening to this podcast, take note.
yeah, it's that ability of his to write love poems, to think about love, to talk constantly about literature. I mean, every single dinner, he was like, "Do you want to hear what I wrote today? Here's the poem I wrote today. What did you learn today? What did you read today? What do you think that Jack and the Beanstalk really was? Where was he climbing to? What's the metaphor?" You know, that sets you up to be a novelist. Years later, I wrote a whole series of fairy tales like When Beauty Tamed the Beast and A Kiss at Midnight because my dad rewrote a fairy tale as Iron John. And he was doing that through my whole childhood. So I was constantly being asked, well, what would it be like to be beautiful? What would it be like if everyone thought you were a beast? What, you know, these were the questions that really interested him on sort of a literary level. So he had a tremendous influence on me. And you know, I miss him a lot.
Oh,
It's,
I'm sure. I Well, I also really like that the through line there tends to just be curiosity, like
yeah,
asking questions. I think right now, not just in books, this is obviously a book podcast, but in a lot of media literacy, critical thinking is
down.
it's definitely down. Yeah. I I don't want to say there's like a war on it that feels too martial, but like there's an active anti-intellectualism that's rising.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that stems from this idea that, you have to be reading Russian literature, or you have to be reading, all of Dickens to understand
Right.
X, Y, or Z, when the reality is it's more about asking questions about what you're reading. It's like how you're reading versus what you're
Hmm.
reading.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
good point. Yep.
yeah, and so I'd like to talk about, your as Mary Bly, you teach Shakespeare at a academic level.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that I quit on January 1st to start writing full time. But
Oh,
yes,
hell yeah.
taught for over 20 years. Shakespeare day in, day out. I mean, that's what you try to teach students, right?
Hmm.
They say, I don't like Hamlet. And the answer over the time I was teaching changed a lot because then I say, why? Why don't you like Hamlet? Let's think about why. So 20 years ago, they'd be like, I don't like Hamlet. Um, you know, he's not nice. He's aggressive. He's just not a nice guy. Well, why is he not nice? You know, it's always the why. And then like 10 years ago, there was this whole burst of why didn't he just break into the throne room with a gun and shoot his uncle? Well, good question, but you know, what is that saying about you that that's the idea that you got? And now they say he's a sexual predator. He's a sex
Really?
offender. Well, go back and read Hamlet and Ophelia with where we are now or where we are on the East Coast, where I teach,
Hmm.
or have been teaching at Fordham University. He, she sings a song. You know, I went into his door, a maiden came out, not a maiden anymore. He breaks up with her, and she kills herself.
That's
We
fair,
got a
yeah.
lot of, yeah, we have a lot of examples of that. I mean, Shakespeare's doing really crazy stuff that people
Yeah.
don't they just don't recognize. They talk about like Romeo and Juliet, it's great love, it's this, that. They don't pay attention to the fact that Juliet's up there in the balcony saying, oh, do you want to marry me? He's never mentioned marriage and he doesn't want to marry her. I mean, it's just never. And then she says, I'll send you a ring. That is the first woman to send a ring to propose marriage or to send him a ring is it's crazy, crazy
Hmm.
pants, as you know,
I
Sarah
think
McLean would say, just nuts.
some of this goes to like understanding what you're engaging with though as well.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not to give Hamlet a pass. Hamlet is one of my favorite Shakespeare plays.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like a well-written villain you should hate, but you should like that you hate them. You should
Yeah.
like that it's a well-written villain.
They're
Um,
complex. Yeah.
yeah. It reminds me, I don't know if you watched the show The Pit on
Oh, yeah.
HBO.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
People this season has been a lot about, you know, Noah Wiley's character, Dr. Robbie.
Yeah.
The entire shift, the entire season, he's devolving further and further into a mental health crisis, and
Yeah.
how that's like bleeding out into the rest of the department. But one character that no matter what she does can't catch any like respect from a majority of the fandom is Trinity Santos.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really good example of like, yeah, sometimes in these rooms she is a bitch to the patients.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to defend her behavior in those moments, but also that doesn't make her bad. That doesn't make her like a bad person or a bad character. It kind of further shows how she can do that and also be a good doctor.
Hmm. Or maybe be even a better doctor. In the last one that I saw, um, the questions that she asks are the brusque ones, right? But they're the
Mhm.
ones that get to the heart of the truth. It's very much set up that way that she's the person who can actually figure things out,
Yeah. And
you
then
know?
we find out, I think I'm thinking about the same
Mm.
episode, but we find out that in her free time, she just kind of like scrolls through bad parts of the internet and finds out like what did she call it? She called it sleep maxing. And the second she called
Yeah.
it sleep maxing, I was like, "Oh, she's familiar with like health nut parts of
Yeah.
the internet that honestly a lot of these doctors should be looking at because that's how you're going to see, you know,
Hmm.
a lot of people in the ER, unfortunately."
Well, like that poor woman who gave,
Yeah.
shut her liver down. Here's a really interesting thing that I was thinking about while watching that episode, which is that I'm really curious about where sort of the Maha crazy no vex, because I believe in vaccination, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'll just say for anyone who might not, if you like me had a daughter who had a chronic illness, my daughter has chronic kidney disease and she was born with it. She has survived because of other people vaccinating themselves because she has no herd immunity to anything for a long time. So this is terrifying, not for me so much because she's moved to Italy where everyone is vaccinated, but for every mother who's in the same situation that I was, who has a baby born at 24 weeks at a pound, you know, my son didn't bring his baby out basically into public for 6 months because it couldn't be vaccinated against measles. Anyway, end of that. I'm just saying, I'm really fascinated to see where the crisis is going to come as AI gets bigger and bigger and becomes part of
Yes.
our lives. Because AI, I know that, an AI could be directed to like believe this kind of stuff, but AI in itself tends to, as far as I understand it, which is not that much, look for actual facts, right? And a lot of this, there's no facts behind. I'm wondering if there's going to be a crash at some point where somebody is talking to AI and AI says, you're not going to vaccinate your child has a 0.14% chance of dying
I
because
think
that would be factually right. That's not right because I made that number totally. But you know what I mean? But
I real quick I do want to say also pro vaccination on the podcast just in case anyone hasn't been clear about my like soapbox moments in the past.
yeah.
Um and I do think that raises an interesting point though because in some respects the AI turn that we're in right now is also defined by the fact that like because AI is free, we're the product essentially. We are feeding it. And
Hmm.
there's been a lot of studies in the last maybe month that have come out that reflect that AI will say what it needs to in order to keep you engaging with
Engaged. Yeah.
engaged with it. Just like any other app, which is, like if you're on Instagram, Instagram is doing what it can to keep you on the app. That's why it
Mhm.
doesn't like when you post things that link to other places.
Right.
So I'd be curious to see if AI devolves in the same way that social media has, or if it does, if by some miracle we get like regulations on it sooner rather than later, and then we are able to see fact reflected in it.
I
It's
really
hard to
do.
say.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's very hard if you're a writer, right?
Hmm.
I took a look at Claude because Anthropic is the only AI company that has paid the authors. The way you train an AI is on people's books and they downloaded them from pirate sites. And my books, like 36 of them were used to train
Ugh,
Anthropic. And
yeah.
Anthropic put aside $1.5 billion, which I'll get like 1,000 or something like that, a book, which is cool. Um, to pay back for the theft that they did. In others, they acknowledge they should have done it differently, as opposed to Meta and ChatGPT, which are like dragging their heels and trying to
Yeah.
say it was fair use and this and that. Um, but I took a look at Anthropic, and I will say that Claude was very helpful. I hooked Claude up to my printer, which hasn't worked forever, because you know what printers are like now. They're so
Yeah.
complicated. And Claude fixed my printer, and I was like, this is great. Let's go back and talk about the coffee machine in the kitchen. I'm like, and then I'm gonna move on to other things like that. But I wouldn't want him anywhere near my ideas.
Yeah.
I think that's a real danger. Like if I think a lot of authors are starting to, obviously some of them are writing books with AI, but I think a lot more of them are plotting with AI. And I think that's enormously problematic because the only
Yeah.
plot ideas you're going to get back are ideas that someone else had, which means that your ideas, the idea that you might have had, the novel you might have had, is never going to be a novel. It's
Yeah.
never going to come to fruition. And I think that's so unfortunate. It's sad.
There's a lot of there's a lot of sides to the AI argument in terms of like environmentalism and
Sure, yeah.
um the classism related to the environmentalism. But I think one of the scarier parts more actively in day-to-day life is that so many people are deferring their intelligence to it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it was Sam Altman, and I'll look it up and I'll check if I was right or not, but I think it was Sam Altman who recently said we're looking essentially to monetize intelligence.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
that is a crazy thing to say publicly and to
right.
be semi-confident or proud of saying. Um, and so, that's why I love to read romance books now and be like, it's not about the books. You don't have to read like
Yeah,
1,000-page Russian literature books, even if you like them, read them.
yeah, sure.
I love a good Gothic novel. I love a good, dense,
War
published
and
before
Peace. Yeah,
1900, yeah,
yeah.
paid by the word kind of book. But also, it's more about how you're engaging with the thing than
Hmm.
the thing itself, because that's where you like stoke that intelligence.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with you. I will say that I think one thing that was wrong with the pit this season is that when the computer went down, they obviously have a huge problem, right? But nobody turned. I'm not very good on this, but my understanding is there are medical AIs now, you know?
well, there was the one
I
that
think learning is going to
Alashimi,
change,
yeah,
you
there
know?
was the one that Alashimi had presented, and she said that it wasn't working. So like they just didn't have access to internet at all. And I
Yeah,
think
that's
part of
true.
the problem as well when you bring in AI with medical stuff is HIPAA compliance.
Uh, but I'm talking about when they're sitting there over, sort of a comatose body, and they're going, "What do we do at this point? What do we do at that point? What do we do?" What da, 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 da. I think you give that a year, somebody's going to be there with
Oh yeah.
because my daughter was just hospitalized, and she won't mind me saying this. It was in February in Italy, and she's fluent. She's absolutely bilingual. However, when you have kidney disease and it's an arcane kidney disease, kind of rare, doctors fled into the hospital room, right? Because they're fascinated. And the other thing is in Italy, it's national medicine. So they can do all the tests they want. So they say, hey, we're going to do another MRI tomorrow. We want to look at the kidneys from this direction. Hey, we're going to do another X-ray because they could do what they want. They're like, we're going to do blood tests every 2 hours and see how this changes. There's no money involved, which means it can be pure intelligence,
Hmm.
right? And you watch that happening, these young doctors coming in, they would have read Anna's charts back like 4 or 5 years. It's the first time they've met someone with this disease. And think, what's going to happen when AI has taken over that curiosity?
Yeah.
Like, is there no more curiosity then because all the knowledge is on your iPad and that's it?
Yeah. And that's actually one of the concerns that I had in this season of The Pit when Alishimi presented the AI to Santos actually, because I was like, Santos is really good at what she's doing. And we've only
Yeah.
seen her for 2 shifts, but like even in this shift, we've seen how much she's improved from season one. I think it's like
Hmm.
10 months later.
Yeah.
And how easily using that AI could cause her to miss
Right.
anything. And
Right.
she's so curious that she's digging into pure brain rot parts of the internet
Right.
just to make sure that she can help people better. Yeah, so I agree. I think there's like curiosity and intellect go together because they feed each other. And
Hmm.
so what happens when you stop feeding one of those?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And, you know, just to turn it back to romance for a moment, people have said for years, my mother among them, that you know, romance is like uh, going to make everyone stupid because they should be reading War and Peace. My mother's real idea was that everyone should be reading Tolstoy at any given moment, um, which, you know, bless her, she had Tolstoy with her in the hospice. She reread him, you know, on the way out. Um, she lived and by her standards, and that's the way she was. And but people have said that romance is was has been blamed like AI for just as long. So I have found myself kind of looking at those things and going, you know, I know that romance wasn't like I fell in love with romance with Charlotte's Web, right? When Fern is up there on the she goes on the Ferris wheel with Henry Fussy or something. Henry Fussy, yeah. So I mean, how old was I? Like 8, and that the emotional ballast of novels that have romance in them has always hugely interested me, much more than say the tragedy of, you know, Anna Karenina or whatever. But it constantly got blamed for dumbing down the masses, for women are making people stupid, as if the kind of thinking that you do when you read isn't as valuable as the kind of thinking that you do if you're reading Anna Karenina or War and Peace, right? Which I don't agree with. So I'm curious about if we skip ahead 5 years, what, where will we be in terms of romance? It's just
Yeah.
a wild idea. I mean, where will we be in terms of AI? Like, is it like that where maybe, hopefully, our fears are a bit overblown?
I would hope so. I'm really hoping that I'm like wrong, the bubble pops soon.
Yeah.
I I really like what you said though about like, they are kind of parallel in some of the accusations. And I think one of the distinctions is that romance is very gendered for women. That is,
Mhm.
I don't know the actual number, but I estimate 90% of the demographic that reads romance novels are women. Um, on the other hand, AI is tech, which is, gendered towards the masculine, towards patriarchy, and the accusations that are similarly thrown towards I have this air almost of conspiracy.
Mhm.
Like, well, that's not true because a man made it. And it's like, yeah, but a man made it based on their own thoughts and then
Mhm.
also somehow made the thing feminized.
Mhm.
This thing that's meant to serve is feminized. So there's definitely like you're wrong because it's masculine, but also it's not masculine, it's feminine, so you're sexist for saying that it is, but it's made by a man,
It's
so it's masculine.
complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The scary thing about AI, I mean, there's so many scary things about AI, but I was just reading the thing that you just mentioned, that AI will make itself into whatever you want. So it will make itself feminine, it will make itself masculine, it will become what you want.
hmm
That's
That's
terrifying.
yeah, like if we
That's
want to talk about identity.
It's scary. It's scary. I mean, I started that story. I didn't quite get there, but when Anna was in the hospital, she found herself using ChatGPT to interpret the test results when they came back, because they came back in this arcane medical Italian that she doesn't know. And ChatGPT would unwind them for her, right? Its advice was not right though. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, you're going to need this. I was like, that's just wrong. You are never going to need, you know, she doesn't need dialysis. She has a different kind of kidney disease. So
Mhm.
he didn't understand the base actual illness, but he was
Yeah.
interpreting the medical results as if it was that kind of kidney insufficiency. So it was helpful for her and not helpful, you
Yeah.
know?
I saw this comedian talking recently about um using ChatGPT for similar stuff, but related to an iron deficiency that they were convinced that they had. and going to doctors, getting the same results, but ChatGPT kept saying that it wasn't that. And I can't remember if they got the iron infusion or not, but after a while, ChatGPT was like, "Oh yeah, I got your test results wrong. Sorry."
I know.
And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, but that's a health thing. That's like an entirely different.
A big thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. You
it's
know what it said? Good for you for pushing back. You're right. I was like, oh, okay. Number one, that language, good for you for pushing back. You condescending little dick. But
yes.
anyway, yeah, that could have been a big mistake. I mean, if I was a doctor reading that, I was like, oh, she needs dialysis. Oh my God. Obviously, that wouldn't happen. This was just like the free version of ChatGPT. I don't think my daughter even paid for it. But um, still, still scary times. Hmm.
The hope
Anyway,
is
we
that
do have
doctors
romance to back
Yeah,
into.
yeah,
There we go.
sorry.
We can escape.
I
No,
would it's a big topic. I could keep going.
it is.
Um
Yes. I just wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal, and they wanted to know why historical romance, why you've got Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice coming out. There's a Jane Eyre coming out, which is going to be fabulous. There's, we have Frankenstein, we had The Wizard of Oz, we have all these classics coming back, right? But many of them historical. And they wanted to know why is historical romance rising? Why is historical? And for me, the answer is so clear. I mean, we escape, right? We escape a world in which you pick the wrong guy or the wrong woman and you're never going to be invited to Thanksgiving dinner again because, the two sides can't tolerate each other to the point that they can't sit at dinner. These are not to mention global warming, global war, all the rest of it, just even on a personal level. I think we need an escape. And where we escape is to the past. Because in the past, my heroine doesn't have to say, are you MAGA or not MAGA? How do you feel about guns, right? She doesn't have to say that. He's a gentleman. He is a certain number of things. He doesn't mean he's good because Burnsby was a gentleman, but he's hideous.
mhm.
So you can still have just as much evil, but it's more perceptible. It's
Yeah.
it's not it's not as overwhelming.
It's also there's this feeling sometimes with modern um romance that I have where it's like I almost can't get into like the threshold of imagination cuts off because we're not talking about those things.
Yeah,
It's like if you're going to bring up COVID as like something that happened in the past, then I also need you to bring up some of the politics around it. Like it can't just
right.
exist within this thing without the context of all of that. And so I think, going into historical romance or this almost like nostalgia
Hmm.
that's fueling all of this
Yeah,
stuff is, I think, also related to the fact that you don't have to acknowledge any of that. We can
right,
acknowledge that certain things never changed. Like there's
right,
expectations put on women that men clearly don't have to follow. But also, there's not any mention of, the grand number of US politicians who happen to be doing the same thing.
right, right. Yeah, it's just things are overwhelming right now. I think
Mhm.
particularly for your age group, you know.
Yeah.
I feel my sister's kids and mine are facing a level of desolation that is, when I grew up on that farm, I had a picture of Paris on my wall, I had a picture of New York on my wall, and I was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of rural Minnesota if I have to kill myself to do it. And I did. I went off to college. I went to college in England. I lived in France. I lived in New York and Italy. I married an Italian. I made all those things happen, but it was me making them happen within a world where it was available. Now the world feels so nebulous and the problems are not yours to solve anymore, you
Yeah.
know? Um, Impossible to solve in a way.
Thank you.
So
Yeah. It's
sorry,
no, I
sorry.
mean, thank you for recognizing that. I think that's part of the reason that like so I one of the catalysts for the beginning of this podcast was that after finishing my master's,
Hmm.
I couldn't read for pleasure anymore. During my master's, during higher ed, I had lost that skill and it like I didn't really notice that I wasn't reading because I was always reading. Really, I got a couple of English majors.
Mhm.
Um, and so you're always reading for that and it's like, well, I don't I just don't read the other stuff now. And then I tried to read just some modern romance. I can't even remember what it was. And I was like, oh, I actually can't do this anymore. And it took me like a year and some change to really start reading books again.
Mhm.
And now so that was during COVID that I was finally able to. And so it's now so much of this is about finding pleasure, or even just like simple pleasures.
Yeah.
I went to King's College for my master's out in London,
Hmm.
and the simple pleasures were going and reading at the park or sitting at a cafe and people watching and avoiding my dissertation. And
Yeah.
now the simple pleasures are like, I'm not going to leave my house because if I leave my house, I'm going to spend $150 on accident just by existing. And I've got books that I need to read. And I think, I look back at times when people were isolated again. During COVID, a lot of plague stuff came out as well, media, and the isolation that can lead to how do you cope with that?
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. It's scary to think that people are going to start creating AIs for themselves, you know.
yeah.
Um, I hope they go like you and just start reading more. Um, it's funny you said that. I went to Oxford for my MA, and some of my best memories are just being on the lawn, yeah,
Yeah.
reading, pubs too. I had a great friend. I made wonderful friends. That was great.
Yeah.
So,
There's something about the pressure of an MA that suddenly you're a lot closer than you would have been otherwise. Um, yeah, I mean, not to talk about the AI too much more, but I remember Matthew McConaughey talking about he wants an AI that is like, because it's common now for people just to build their own private
great.
servers.
So they have
And
like 3 or 4 of them even. Yeah.
yeah, and he's like, I'll just plug all of my journals, all of the things that I've written into it, and I can have that to talk to. And I was like, you could just think. You have a
Yeah.
brain.
Right.
And I think so much of this is actually connected to this like fear of death
Mm.
because as he gets older, he's not going to remember everything. And to have this version of him almost that can help him continue to think in his own eyes, continue to think the way that he would have thought when he was younger, that won't age and lose all
Mm.
of that.
That, I mean, that might, I can see that. I mean, my father had dementia. People tape themselves,
Mhm.
telling their older selves with dementia, do you remember that we got married and then we this and we did that and the other thing? And then they watch it. I suppose AI could fill that role to some extent.
Yeah.
Um, his life became very small because he couldn't, someone who just read passionately, spoke like, a ton of languages because he translated a lot of poetry, couldn't read anymore.
Mm.
That's a tragedy that
Yeah.
maybe AI could help with.
I think that's one of my big frustrations with AI is that it's being used currently to replace art and thinking and attempts at culture when it could be used like we already have non-generative AI has existed already, and
Yeah.
that is, assistive things like things to help with people who are hard of hearing or who can't see or for whatever sense to help like bridge those gaps or for people who are forgetting things to help them with
Hmm.
that. But instead it's, there was a scandal within the bookish community, I'll say, and it was there was an author who was accused of using AI. And I think what ended up coming out was that she hadn't used it, but somebody in the process of publishing her book had used it on the book and that had made
That
its
the
way into
British
it.
woman?
I think so.
Yeah, but I mean, well, I don't know for sure. But I mean, apparently some of the first reviews, even when it was independently published, said this is AI.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be more and more difficult to tell
Yeah.
because she had repeating phrases and stuff and characters change names, I gather. I don't know.
No, I mean that makes sense. And absolutely I agree that we should come down on this stuff. But then you get like a guy who's admitting to using AI to create all of his books now. And he's like, I just write all my books with AI and he just keeps his deal and he just keeps publishing. And I'm like, why?
Well, hey, I mean, there's going to be a distinction, right? My contract says you may not use AI
Oh,
with Simon
nice.
Schuster. Your contract with HarperCollins, if you have that, is going, there's going to start being a bigger and bigger divide. I
Hmm.
think I used to really love Kindle Unlimited because there were some romance authors like Mariana Zapata, whom I love her books, was only publishing on Kindle Unlimited, right? But now it feels like everything I download is just the quality isn't there, and you do
Yeah,
get the sense that it's heavily inflected, let's say by AI. I think there's just going to be this widening barrier between people who are using it and people who are not. We
absolutely.
recognize, there was an interesting study of kids your age. They gave them all pictures. It was a company that created all of their advertising from AI pictures and spun them out and then watched what happened. And everybody your age just scrolled right by them
Oh,
without,
yeah.
no, just boom, boom, boom. And then they went back to all non-AI and all their sales came back. It was fascinating because to me, to my eyes, the pictures looked the same. It was like pretty people doing stuff. But you guys
It's
are imperceptibly, your brains, which are still smarter than AI, are recognizing the clues for non-authenticity. And I think that will save literature in the end.
agreed, agreed. And I find the younger generations more actively anti-AI because there's times also when I'm like hanging out with my mom and she'll show me a video and I'm just like, that's AI. I don't know how I
Yeah,
can tell, but I know. I can see something in it.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. You-
it's
It's interesting. It's just
yeah.
really interesting. I look at my grandson, he's 7 months old, and he has never been shown a screen because there's going to be this, it's going to be like the medieval monks, right? Only this amount of the population has not seen a screen and has an intact imagination and is being read to. And this amount are going to become prompters. So you have prompters and creators, and the creators are going to be smaller and smaller, but it's going to be a question of enormous privilege, right? To be
Yeah.
part of the creators. Um, so, we're at an hour, so I don't know.
I
I'm going to
know.
keep
I
talking about it.
I guess my last thought on this before we
Mhm.
go back to the book for a few minutes is just that the I so I studied history. There was a time in my life when I was like, I'll be an archaeologist, and then I wanted to work in museums, and then I got into English. And so, like, if it's humanities, I've probably like spent a
Studied
class or
it.
two in it.
Right.
And so thinking about, pre-printing press when writing and reading was exclusive,
Right.
we're almost barreling towards a period like that again, where
Yep.
the general public just won't be able to engage with
Yep.
if
I
something
agree.
doesn't change sooner rather than
Yep.
later.
They'll be prompters.
Yeah.
They won't be creators. And that's unfortunate. We're back with the medieval monks being the only ones who could read.
Hmm.
And they were so tiny part of the population. Everyone else just going to church and not even understanding Latin. Um,
And how much of history gets lost in periods like that?
Incredible amounts. I mean, you
Yeah.
got only men writing this history. I mean, I just heard today that Texas is redoing um, their education programs entirely to be Texas centered. And I would be so worried if I was a child, if I had a child, I was growing up in Texas. I mean, there are parts of Texas I really love and I have great friends there, but wow, that is a huge, huge shift
Yeah.
to be Texas centered, and not, and nation centered.
Very, I guess, like nationalistic. Is there a word for a state level of
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
there is. It's gonna be something. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
So
So your lovely romance book.
no, I know. Escape, everybody. Look.
Yes, escape into the semi-gothic,
Yeah,
very, very
escape.
lovely romance.
I want to
Um,
say, look at this cover, okay? So
yes.
its covers are very weird right now, right? Because Simon Schuster and HarperCollins and so on are not having AI covers. So this was made by a young guy who has done some wonderful stuff for automobiles. I mean, he has a very particular way of drawing. and they found him for me and said, "What do you think?" And I was like, "He looks great." But it's so interesting to me what he came up with, because you can see there's snow swirling around her, but she
Hmm.
really is, she couldn't be AI.
Yeah.
AI could not produce her with her odd little expression and her looking back over her shoulder, and
Yeah.
this, could do the swirl of enchanted snow for sure. But the rest, her expression, her eyes, I
It's
think that's
dynamic in a way that
fascinating.
AI can't capture.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's personal. It's personal to him. If you saw all his ads right now, you'd know exactly who he was,
Okay.
exactly who did this. So I think that will happen with literary voice too.
Yeah.
I think, to some extent, who an Eloisa, what an Eloisa book is. It's taken me, all these years to become more and more Eloisa, essentially, to keep learning. If I gave up and did AI, I would stop learning.
Yeah.
Be unfortunate.
To learn is to grow, and it astounds me that some people are okay just passing the buck off to a machine. But yeah.
Yeah, but we got to see, the other thing is we got to not be judgmental, because that's
Yes.
what people did to romance, right? They were like, "Ah,
Yeah.
you're reading stupid stuff. You must be stupid." So we don't know what's going on. We don't know the depth of emotion they may be experiencing or feeling. It's not something I want to share, but you know,
Agreed. And as things get weirder and worse, as they have for the last few
maybe
months
better.
now,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be more conscious of like who is actually trying to push this and who is passively engaging in a way that like shouldn't be judged but should be questioned almost, if that
Yeah,
makes
well, you
sense.
look at, we were talking about vaccinations. I mean, the women who are not vaccinating their babies, it's not because they don't love the babies, right? They
Yeah.
do love them. They are caught in terror. And I think a lot of the terror is just spilling over into things you can control, because
Hmm.
there's so much you can't control. So I can control this one thing, right? I can control what I put into my baby's body because I can't control any of the rest.
Yeah.
And it's an open question whether that child will live to majority, and it won't, might not be vaccinations that take them out. So
Yeah.
we have to remember that too. It's not be judgmental.
I think
Evie.
there is an element too to tie it back to romance into your book. When she discovers all of these things, Evie discovers all of these things that have been hidden from her for 7 months. Her first act is to take control of the Abbey.
Hmm.
She
Yeah,
gets drunk that night, more power to her, wakes up the next morning and goes to the
it's
housekeeper
that.
and uh-huh, mm-hmm,
I'm in
immediately
charge
starts
now.
working to gain some semblance of control. And I think in some ways that's also almost an appeal of romance
Hmm.
because we know it's going to end in a happily ever
Yeah.
after. That is a key component of the romance novel. And I love that that is a constant that I can depend on in these as I try to escape.
Right. No, you're right. It's, everybody talks about it being a fantasy of love, but in a lot of ways, it's a fantasy of comeuppance and competence.
Hmm.
These women surmount challenges, and they surmount them with grace and intelligence, and it's sort of, I have lots and lots and lots of letters over time from women saying, "Hey, I solved this problem by thinking, what would X heroine do?" Esme was one of my heroines who a lot of people fastened onto and said, "What would Esme say to my husband?" Right, this is what Esme would say, and I'm like, great. What am I supposed to say? That's what Esme would say to your husband? I don't know. But, you do Esme. So they do give us models in a way of
Hmm.
women written by women dealing with problems that we face, problems of misbehaving men, desire when you shouldn't desire, competence, money,
Yeah.
what you do for money. Yeah.
And as somebody who could be called a man hater, as much as I try not to be, I think the accusation that some of this is like a fantasy of love is rooted in this assumption that men aren't capable of stepping up to like the level of Godric.
Mm.
when the reality is like those people exist and men are capable of it, and it actually is a
Yeah.
disservice to believe that they aren't and to expect them
Mhm.
to not be.
Yep, I agree with you. My husband's really great. I'm lucky.
Nice.
I know.
And it's you can feel and hear that you know good men.
Yeah, it's been interesting over my career. Like most of the people who I started out with when I was young and I got my first career, Mike got invited to the first dinner party it was at a publishing house that doesn't exist anymore. My
Ugh.
book was coming out in hardcover, so it was called Delacorte. And I went, there was a long table of women, and none of them are writing anymore. And a lot of them fell out of the practice for this or that, or they just, retired. But a lot of them got divorced. And when
Mm.
you're divorced, you can't romance. These, from my perspective, many of them started writing suspense, killing people
Oh.
off. So,
I mean, however you had to deal with it.
whatever, right? I'm glad I didn't have to go there because that's not what I like to read. So, yeah.
A question that I ask all of my guests is if you could only recommend one book for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Wow, one book for the rest of your life. Um, I'd probably take something in a foreign language because if I only got one thing, I want to learn a different language while doing it, right?
Yeah.
I have to keep learning. So I would probably pick something really, really complicated, um, uh, like like nothing is coming to mind, of course, but something very big, very long, and in a language I don't know, so that I was learning the language as I went. And I would like it to be a collection of poetry, probably.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so that's what I would do. But I would rather not be in that situation, please.
Fair. Yeah.
That sounds horrendous. So one book. Oh, anyway, thank you so much for having me. It's been such
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Well,
Really, it has a lot of fun.
thank you. Thank you. I had a blast today. Um, where can readers find more about you?
Well, my website is eloisajames.com, and I'm on Facebook, and I have a Facebook group that's a lot of fun because I go on there live, once a week. So you can leave questions and then come and hang out and talk to me on Saturdays or Thursdays. The times change. Then I'm on Instagram, and I actually managed to answer a lot of the messages on Instagram. And I'm on TikTok. That is how my very young people in my family, more or less. And so that can be kind of fun. I had one go viral with Taylor Swift. That went over 1 million people.
Nice,
Taylor
nice.
Swift mentioned my dad in one of her songs. That was very good for his career.
I'm sure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Um,
Robert Bly and his nightstand. So, woo. That video did a lot. I was like, hey, this is my dad. I don't think it sold any romances, but you
it
know,
might have sold more of your dad's books.
yeah, that I think probably.
Um, thank you so much for joining me today. I will pop those links down below. If you have,
Thank you. And if you guys have any response to Last Lady B and anyone
yes,
reads it, I would love to hear it. Just come by Lindo Castle or shoot me a message on Instagram or leave a message anywhere. Um, I'd love to hear from you. So
awesome.
thank you so much, Melissa. This is lovely.
Yeah, of course. I hope everyone listening has a great rest of your day and happy reading. Thank you for joining me for another episode of In Bed with Books, a bookish podcast for bookish babes. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of the latest updates. And if you have any suggestions for authors, books, or topics that you want to hear about on the podcast, then feel free to DM me on Instagram or shoot me an email. I'm wishing you a lovely rest of your day, and until next time, happy reading.